Hello and welcome to Where You Lead, a podcast where we, a real-life mother and daughter duo, rewatch Gilmore Girls and discuss the misadventures of fictional mother and daughter duo Lorelai and Rory Gilmore. I am Tess Adair, a writer and the author of the paranormal mystery series The Kerouac Chronicles, and Beth's daughter.
And I'm Beth, Tess's mom and fellow culture critic, writer, and lover of all things Gilmore Girls, as well as a few other things like Star Trek and Harry Potter. We have been joined at the hip, much like Lorelai and Rory, for just a little over 3 decades. I should also warn listeners that I am likely to slip up, much as Lorelai might, and call Tess by her birth name, but my goal is to follow her lead.
And every week, we will start off with a synopsis of the episode, along with the date it aired, before heading into our discussion. So, let's begin.
Okay, so today, in our first podcast, we are discussing the pilot for the Gilmore Girls. This is where almost everything about the show gets set up in a mere 40 or so minutes. The pilot originally aired on the WB on October 5th, 2000, starred Lauren Graham as Lorelai and Alexis Bledel as Rory. It moved to the CW, and the final episode aired on May 15th, 2007.
So a very basic synopsis of the episode. We get introduced to Rory and Lorelai, a mother and daughter duo, a quick-witted mother and daughter duo. Lorelai is quite young. We learn pretty quickly that she was 16 when she gave birth to Rory, and that her decision to raise Rory on her own caused a bit of a rift between her and her parents, and things between them have been icy ever since. The big event of the pilot is that Rory gets accepted into the private school Chilton, a prestigious school that she very much wants to go to, but which is expensive. Too expensive for Lorelai to be able to completely afford upfront on her own. Lorelai manages an inn and is very good at her job, but she is not particularly wealthy. Makes enough money for them to get by, but Chilton is just a little bit out of reach, thus causing the crisis of the episode. How are they going to figure out how to pay for Chilton? Which leads them directly to really the only answer. Lorelai has to go to the parents that she kind of hates to ask them for money. Specifically for a loan. She very much plans to pay them back. Lorelai's wealthy old money parents agree, but her mother has one condition. She wants them back in her life. She wants them to come to weekly dinners, and she wants a weekly phone call from Lorelai with updates on Rory's life and her own life. The episode then ends with the first of these Friday dinners, wherein we discover exactly why Lorelai is so reluctant for this situation. It does not go particularly well for her. All right, so that's kind of our basic summary of the plot of the episode. So let's get into the meat of it.
Good synopsis, by the way.
Thank you. We open on a shot of Stars Hollow, complete with a cute little purple sign that says Stars Hollow. Stars Hollow is the name of the picturesque small town that they live in. I do love Stars Hollow. It's a very Hollywood small town. Everything is super cute, and it's defined by all the quirky characters that live there, many of whom we do get introduced to in this first episode.
It's a very traditional small town where everybody knows everybody.
Yes.
And everybody knows everybody's business.
Yes.
So sometimes they know everybody's business before the people know their own business. So it's a very tropish kind of small town, but the opening scene does set the tone for the rest of the show. There's also a song playing, and I don't know who the singer is, but the line that I wrote down was "There she goes racing through my brain."
Oh yeah,
is in the opening song. So, and as that line plays, Lorelai is walking across and walking into another one of our major sets or scenes, I guess. Mm-hmm. What would you call that? Not a set, but set, I guess.
Set piece,
Set piece, yeah, Luke's Diner.
Yes, Luke's Diner.
So she walks into Luke's Diner, and the first scene happens, and it, again, it shows how smart Lorelai and Rory are. And I may be getting ahead a little bit here, but they are almost always the smartest people in the room.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I feel about them. But there's a guy in Luke's Diner who tries to pick Lorelai up.
Yes. Also, we get introduced to Lorelai's coffee addiction pretty much right away.
Oh yeah.
She goes in begging Luke for coffee. He asks her how many cups she's had already, and she says 5, but she still wants
5. And it's early in the day. Yes, coffee is another character in the show.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and then she gets hit on by this guy who does not understand her Jack Kerouac reference.
No. He travels a lot. She says, "Oh, you're a regular Jack Kerouac." He doesn't get it.
Nope.
But that does also set up Lorelai's intellect and her wit. And, Jack Kerouac is somebody not everybody knows.
Yeah.
But Lorelai does. And, she was a high school dropout. So I think that says something about her. Anyway, he sits down. She keeps cajoling him, and he eventually leaves. And then Rory walks in.
Yeah. Rory walks in, and Lorelai gets up to get Rory a cup of coffee. And Luke at first does not believe her and calls her shameless for already wanting another cup. And then when she turns around to show him that it's for Rory, that man has returned and now he's hitting on Rory.
Yeah.
So she comes back in with the rescue to kind of make fun of this guy a little bit more. And she explains to him that Rory is her daughter. He does have a moment, I'm not sure exactly what the order is, but he does say, "Well, I'm traveling with a friend. You could both come out with us." Then she explains that her daughter is 16, and Rory, without missing a beat, turns to him and goes, "Are you my new daddy?"
My dad.
Oh, it's great.
Oh, yes.
It's actually...
It's a great scene.
I was thinking about it. It's a very kind of Howard Hawks style scene. He loves to introduce his characters as just kind of very quick-witted and throwing out all these lines, and how you know that someone is on the in-group is if they can keep up with the quick-witted repartee. Mm-hmm. So you kind of know immediately with how quickly Rory catches on that they are both at that level. They work this way, and this other guy does not. He's not on their level. He cannot keep up with them.
And let me just add here that these two actresses have writers. Mm-hmm. You and I never really were that witty.
Yeah, not that quickly, that's for sure.
Not that quickly, no. They have writers, people do their hair.
Yeah,
we were not quite that pulled together or that witty, but there are a lot of similarities, and we will get to those later on.
Yes.
But yeah, this is just an awesome opening scene with the two of them. It shows how smart they are, how funny they are, and how they act together, how they are a united front. And in this case, it's united front against this jerk who thinks that he can just, come on to any woman who he walks up to. Yes. And he's not really a jerk. He seems like he's probably a nice guy. I shouldn't say he's a jerk. But they're there to talk to each other, and he kind of interrupts that flow. And they let him know right away that he's an interloper and he needs to go away. So
yeah, he's not necessarily a jerk, but he does hit on a 16-year-old moments after hitting on her mother. Granted, I think the implication is he does not realize that she's 16, but he's...
Or that Lorelai is old enough to have a 16-year-old daughter.
For sure.
She looks very young. And she is young.
For sure.
She is young. She's 32. Yeah. She's very young.
Yeah, so. She is young. Oh, God, I'm older than Lorelai. Anyway, this scene also, I just wanted to point out, they have a little exchange about makeup. Rory wants some lip gloss, so Lorelai pulls out 2 full bags of makeup, and Rory's comment is, RuPaul doesn't need this much makeup, which I will say, having watched a lot of drag queen YouTube videos, actually, these makeup bags are pretty small compared to what drag queens carry around. But I do appreciate the reference, and it does kind of tell you right away that, especially for the time, not as many people were aware of RuPaul as are now. Now that RuPaul owns half of the world. So you kind of, it's another sign that they're very aware of pop culture and very keyed in to these things.
I don't think in 2000 I would have known who RuPaul was. And in fact, you probably would have had to explain it to me. But yeah, they are very much on top of cultural trends and references. And you get that a lot in the show, throughout the show. Never stops. And, it's just a big part of their culture.
Yeah.
Is pop culture.
You might not have known who RuPaul was, but just quick moment, you would have seen RuPaul at this point, which I know because you and I used to watch Sabrina the Teenage Witch together, and RuPaul had a pretty serious guest role on that. Not that that has anything to do with this.
That's excellent. I did not remember that. So
both in drag and out of drag. It was a very fun episode.
Okay.
All right. So moving along, I think that's pretty much everything we need from that scene. I believe the next scene is Lorelai going to her job at the inn, where we get introduced to one of the best characters, Michel. Michel is on the phone with a customer saying, "No, I'm sorry, we're completely booked." Michel is French, in case that's not clear from my not very good French accent. But yeah, so we get introduced to Lorelai at her job. We see Michel, who is trying to explain to a customer on the phone that they're completely booked, and going through this whole rigmarole to get them to try a different weekend, only to tell them that they're actually completely booked on that weekend as well.
His one line that I wrote down is he keeps arguing with this person back and forth. I mean, it goes on 5 or 6 or 7 times where no, we are completely booked. No, we are completely. But then I'd have to build a room for you myself. I'm not a man who works with his hands. He's hilarious. He's a great foil for Lorelai. And at one point, when she tells him to do something, he says, "I despise you." And the thing is, he acts like he despises everybody.
Yes.
It's a front. It's just the way he interacts. He never smiles. I don't know that we ever see Michel smile.
I think you see him smile sarcastically.
Sarcastically. But the thing is, in that same scene, and they segue pretty quickly into 2 other things that happen in that first scene. Where first she's on the phone and with the plumber. And to talk to him about a bill he's giving her for work on something that he had already fixed. And she says to him, you already fixed this before. And he said, "Well, how do you know that? How do you, I don't know what he asked her because we can't hear him. But she says, "Because you told me and I never forget anything. This one's on you, right?" She is an incredibly competent businesswoman. She doesn't forget anything.
Yeah.
And in that same scene, she also has hired a harpist for the lobby, which always makes me think, how big is this inn? Yeah. It doesn't look that big from the outside. How many guest rooms do they have? They never answer these questions for me, and I always have them. Maybe it's because I'm older. I don't know, but I look at this and think, well, is it like a bed and breakfast? Are there only 7 rooms? Or are there 20 rooms? So how many people? And then the other thing, too, is there's a restaurant in the inn. Yes. So it could be that there are only 7 rooms, but there's also a very busy and popular restaurant that people drive to from all over Connecticut. Anyway, so she hires a harpist to play in the lobby. And this is, the harpist has as bad an attitude as Michel does. And she is played by Alex Borstein, who is now in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and is just an amazing character in that show. But in here, she is also a foil. I don't think we see her after the first few episodes. She kind of goes away. But in the first 2 episodes, she's amazing. She's very sarcastic, kind of bitchy.
Yeah. I think
an artistic temperament.
You see her a few times, but she's definitely not as mainstay a character as some of the others, for sure.
Yeah.
If anyone is not aware of who Alex Borstein is, they might know her better as the voice of Lois Griffin from Family Guy. Which,
really?
Yes. She is.
I did not know that.
I think she's putting on a voice when she does Lois. It doesn't sound completely like her. So it just shows her range.
So, but in Mrs. Maisel, she plays Susie.
Yes.
She is like one of the main characters in the show. And the thing about how it also supports the idea that Lorelai is a great businesswoman, she handles her really well. She doesn't win.
Yeah.
I think Drella wins the argument, but Lorelai knows when to give up and walks away. So
I think this scene is also a good example of because sometimes Lorelai is put into situations where her kind of constantly flippant attitude seems inappropriate, but I think in this scene you can really see how it works for her, because she's able to be assertive with both Drella, the harp player, and the guy on the phone without being mean, because she's able to kind of put it in this jokey manner so that she's getting her point across, but you kind of can't be mad at her because she's being funny. She's being like nice and friendly and funny and even a little flirty, but in a way that like gets her point across. It really works.
She's very flirty.
Yeah. She's kind of how
and that cannot be underscored enough.
Yeah, she is definitely very flirty. But she's kind of how I wish I could be when I'm trying to assert myself. You want to find that perfect balance.
Yeah, but she has writers. Again, let's not forget.
True. She has writers, and she is played by a charismatic actor. All right, so I believe the next scene is Lane and Rory walking to school, I think. And so this is our introduction to Lane, Rory's best friend, and a child of Korean immigrants who own the antique store in town. Lane does here refer to her parents in the plural, but we only really see her mom in this episode. We'll keep an eye on that going forward. But yeah, Lane is complaining to Rory that her parents have set her up with a future Korean doctor. This is, and she's not excited about it. She's not really on board with her parents' desire to matchmake for her at the tender age of 16. But her parents really want her to marry someone Korean, and they'd really like her to marry a doctor. So they are already trying to get her on that road.
And Rory says to her, "You're kidding." And she says, "Koreans never joke about future doctors."
Yes.
Which sets up Lane's personality perfectly, because she is definitely Korean. She honors and respects her mother and what she wants for her. But she is an all-American kid who loves punk rock and pop culture. Yeah. And in this scene, he's changing clothes.
Yeah, she's changing clothes
so she can get herself ready to see her mom, because she respects her parents' culture. But she's like. She's the perfect all-American kid with immigrant parents. She understands their positions. She knows where they come from. But she's who she is. Yeah. And she loves American culture.
She loves evil rock
American
music.
Culture. Yeah, especially rock music, but all of it probably more than Rory and Lorelai do.
All right, so the next scene is at school. This is before Rory has gotten into Chilton, so it's a scene at public school, and it's a kind of study hall where the teacher starts off by saying that they can do whatever homework they have, and several of the girls in Rory's class immediately ignore that and pull out nail polish to start painting their nails and gossiping, but one of them notices that Rory has bent her head to her desk and is scribbling away furiously. The girls, at least one of them, assumes that she's writing a note to someone or something and tries to see it, and then comes back with kind of a look of dismay or at least confusion and says she's doing the homework, like that's the most unfathomable thing. Which, I do. So I think the point of this scene is to kind of set up that Rory is quote unquote not like other girls.
She's different.
Yeah, that she's more focused on her schoolwork. I mean, I don't remember having study halls, so I can't really comment on the reality of the scene, but I feel like I probably would have wanted to use a study hall to do homework so I wouldn't have to do it at night. Right? Like, you can't really have...
Well, I think the implication might be that they don't do their homework at night either.
Yeah.
And the polish thing brings up all kinds of questions, because they're using polish that it's got to smell. So why doesn't the teacher smell it?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's a quick scene, so maybe they just decided they wanted to keep it short. They didn't want to have the kids getting in trouble. But the other question that it always brings up for me when I see it is, and they're not horribly mean to her, because they don't engage with her. They're talking about her, not to her. But it does kind of portray them as a little mean.
Yeah.
Although I think the girl who says, and it's a slam book or something that they think she might be doing.
Yeah, they think she's doing a slam book.
Yeah. And then, but then when she looks over and sees that Rory's doing the homework, she does say she's doing the homework incredulously, but also with just a very slight amount of respect. I don't think I'm seeing that into the scene. I really think there's a little bit of respect there. It's not enough for her to want to be best friends with Rory, but still at the same time, I just wish this whole mean girls thing would go away. That this portrayal of teenage girls as mean to each other is, first of all, I'm not sure where it comes from. It didn't happen. I mean, it happened occasionally when I was in high school, but not a lot, because I am older. But I just don't think that's it. I think it doesn't happen as often as it is portrayed in popular culture. And by portraying it over and over again, we support the idea that it's okay to be mean. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it exists, first of all. I don't think it's a healthy image to continue to put out there in popular culture over and over again. And I hope we are at the end of that era, because there was even a whole movie series about Mean Girls. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that.
I mean, I think my issue with the scene is that they're trying to set up this dichotomy between Rory and other girls, that like either you can be a good girl who does the schoolwork, or you can be a girl who does nail polish. And I feel like usually this show does a better job of showing that Rory can be both. There are others, like the opening scene was Rory borrowing lip gloss from her mom, and that didn't invalidate her intelligence in any way. But in this scene, it feels like they are setting up this dichotomy between Rory, the smart one, and these other girls who are shallow and maybe not stupid, but at the very least uninterested in intellectual things. And I don't.
But in fact, there's a lot to be said for girls interacting. We could get into the whole psychology of development, and I won't. I'll give it 10 seconds. But girls develop and mature through their interactions with each other. So these interactions are important. I think they're equally important with doing the homework. Mm-hmm. So I am going to choose to believe that they put the nail polish on and then they put it away and did their homework. That's what I'm going to choose. So they had a little bit of interaction. And, Rory is, in some ways, very immature. Mm-hmm. So maybe her reluctance or her whatever it is that prevents her from these kinds of interactions with other girls has actually slowed down her development a little bit. Yeah. Because she's reserved. She's just she's very mature in terms of her intelligence and her ability to be witty. But sometimes she's, as we will find later in the episode, she's not very experienced with boys. Never been on a date. So she's not as worldly as she comes across in her exchanges with her mom. Yeah. They seem very worldly, but her experience belies that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In some ways, she's very sheltered. All right. So let's go on to the next scene, which is Sookie in the kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
So, I have mixed feelings about this scene. On the one hand, I love Sookie. She's so funny, and this is a great introduction to her character. It kind of sets up the, not exactly a contradiction, but the multi-layered personality of Sookie, where on the one hand, she's this brilliant chef, and on the other hand, she's a whirling dervish of chaos. Just a tornado through the kitchen. She has this whole team of assistants who are basically there to keep her from burning the whole kitchen down. They're following behind her as she almost sets things on fire or almost grabs hot pans without anything covering her hands. It's like literally one of them
chops her fingers off.
Yeah, almost chops her fingers off. They're like constantly slightly tweaking what she's doing to keep her from causing any more chaos. There's actually, I think, 2 scenes in the kitchen, and in one of them she references having stepped on her own thumb somehow. In another one, she accidentally sets she throws a dish towel down on a lit burner and it catches on fire, and one of her beleaguered assistants puts a big lid down on top of it to help calm the fire.
Matter-of-factly. Everything they do is very matter-of-fact to protect her.
And I think he might be the same one that she hit in the face with a frying pan accidentally.
Oh, yeah. So the kind of slapstick here, it's the Three Stooges kind of slapstick violence. And she puts the workers at risk all the time. It's very concerning, but it is choreographed like a dance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliantly choreographed, but at the same time, you're like, you appreciate how they filmed this, and at the same time, you're horrified.
Yeah.
And it's because it's the end of this choreographed dance of slapstick violence in the kitchen. She ends up hitting one of the guys with a cast iron skillet in the head.
In the face.
Which realistically would kill you.
Yeah.
So
they're also like for me, the kind of unfortunate downside to this scene is that all of her assistants are at least presented as being Latino. They speak Spanish. But they aren't really they're not really individual characters. They kind of just exist to protect Sookie, basically, to work for her and protect her and make her genius work. And I do think it's worth noting that overall, Gilmore Girls is a pretty white show. There are a couple of characters of color, mainly Lane and Michel. And this kitchen staff, except the kitchen staff aren't really characters. They're just to background support for Sookie. So
now,
on the one hand, I think it's a good scene, but on the other hand, I do think it's a little bit unfortunate and I think it could be fixed just by, making one of those characters an actual character. Maybe the man that she hits in the face could be an actual full character with a personality instead of kind of a...
Which never happens.
Which never happens.
Yeah. But I will say that Anthony Bourdain has talked about how there are a lot of Latino people working in kitchens across the country in restaurants. That's a pretty standard thing. So that's not unrealistic. But I agree with you that they're just background.
Yeah.
They're not real characters, and yet they're getting hit in the face with pans. And I mean, why doesn't he come back in later on with an ice pack on his head and some dialogue?
Yeah.
Give him a name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
And they're clearly very skilled and good at their jobs because they're able to deal with her chaos, but they're not really given personalities, and that's pretty unfortunate.
And the other thing that you have mentioned in the past, too, when we've talked about this scene, is how she's making, and you said there were 2 scenes.
Yeah, there's 2
scenes.
So
the latter one, I guess, she's making is it a peach sauce?
It's a peach sauce, yeah.
A peach sauce that is delicious, and the feeling is, in the scene that you get from them, is that it's all worth it because she's created this work of art, and it's peach sauce. And but Lorelai comes back with a line that has bothered you and me both.
Yeah.
And she says, someday when we open our own inn, diabetics will line up to eat this sauce.
Yeah.
So that's and admittedly this is 2000, but that's kind of a slam to diabetics. Go ahead.
It's a flippant joke about a very serious disease. And I think that, we'll see this more as the show goes on, but there is a tension in this show between the fact that on the one hand, they treat Sookie, who is an overweight woman, as like a full character, and they treat her with a lot of respect, and they're never fatphobic towards her. but there is a lot of background fat phobia in this show. And I think that line is a prime example. And it's kind of a particularly cruel example. You and I have both known multiple people who have diabetes, and it is a very serious disease. And turning it into the butt of a joke is not okay with me.
No, it's not okay with me either. I'm not sure where in this scene. It seems like the two scenes in the kitchen have something in between them happening. Yeah, I don't remember.
They do. So I think they actually have...
There's a line I have written down that I can't place.
Okay.
So, and it's a very important line, but I can't remember what scene it comes out of. It's one where she says that I can resent her for it, and we can finally have a normal mother-daughter relationship. Do you remember what scene that was from?
I don't, oh boy, I can't remember the line that comes right before that, but I'm pretty sure it's after they find out that Rory has gotten into Chilton.
It is.
Oh, it's so that Rory can have all of the opportunities that Lorelai never had, and she can resent her for it.
That Lorelai never had.
Yeah.
And then she says that, I can resent her for it, we can have a normal mother-daughter relationship, like the one she has with her mother.
Yes.
So there's a little foreshadowing here, because her mother kind of resents her. We'll get to that later. But the real reason I brought it up is that I don't think you and I have ever had that. So there's a lot of, I am your biggest cheerleader. I don't resent anything that you do. I think it's all wonderful. And we've just never had that kind of relationship, but I see it in this show, and they talk about it occasionally, although I don't think Lorelai ever does resent Rory. She really doesn't. She's her biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
But she does have that kind of relationship with her mom.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I wonder if, to a certain extent, that stereotype comes from an older generation. Because I feel like the implication there is, you resent older people resenting younger people for being able to do things that they themselves couldn't do. So I wonder if maybe, kind of the changes in what women were culturally allowed to do in like the 60s onward maybe kind of created that stereotype, women who were sort of forced to be nothing but housewives in the 50s and earlier, resenting their daughters who were able to join the workforce in a way that they themselves had not been allowed to do. I mean, that's maybe that's being a little too specific. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that have gone into it, but
it is a generalization, but I think it's one that's supported in media stereotypes and whatever. I will say that my mother was in that generation. She never resented me. She promoted me and pushed me and supported me just the way I have done with you. So I think it might be a personality thing. And I also don't think that Emily, Lorelai's mom, resents her career. She resents her for other things. Yeah. But she doesn't resent, in fact, it's almost the opposite. We'll get to it eventually, but there's a different kind of dichotomy there. So,
and I guess also going into that stereotype is the stereotype of like the pageant mom who forces her daughter into a bunch of pageants to either relive her glory days or to live the glory days she never had. Which you were definitely not a pageant mom.
No, and I don't know anybody who was. I think it's a stereotype, but stereotypes come from somewhere. Yeah. And so there must be some mothers out there like that. Yeah. So it wouldn't resonate. So
I think the scene that comes in between is when Rory and Lane actually encounter Lane's mom. After school, they go to the antique store, and they walk through the antique store, and they start this running gag that comes up over and over again whenever we go to the antique store. Yeah. They can never find her mom. They can hear her, and her mom always shouts something unhelpful like, "I'm near the table." But it's an antique store, so it's full of tables.
There are lots of tables.
Yeah.
And it almost gives you a feeling of being in a hoarder's home, but it's not. It's just a really overstuffed,
and antique store.
Store.
It's also a very successful antique store. Like it's
very successful.
Yeah, it's so stuffed because she's constantly moving stuff. She's constantly successfully selling stuff.
Everything half off.
Yeah. And we also they do eventually find Mrs. Kim, and that's Lane's mom, Mrs. Kim. And when they do, she tells them that she has some what is it, sprouted wheat muffins that are very good for digestion, but they're only good for 24 hours, so they need to eat them right away. And thus begins...
And it's the way she
Go ahead.
The way she describes it is so unappealing.
Yeah. She has...
There's nothing that sounds worse.
Yeah, so this is kind of this is an introduction to another thing with Mrs. Kim, where she really wants Lane to eat all of this healthy food. Lane, on the other hand, would love nothing more than to live off of French fries and pizza. And
she's an American teenager.
Yeah.
She's an American girl.
They also, so when they're trying to find Mrs. Kim, at first it's just Lane who's calling out to her, but then Mrs. Kim asks a question and Rory ends up answering it, and Mrs. Kim goes, "Who's that?" And Lane says, "It's Rory, Mom." And you hear Mrs. Kim go, "Oh." And Rory's like, "Wow, I can hear the disappointment from here." And this is where we kind of establish that Mrs. Kim does not approve specifically of Lorelai. As Lane puts it, she doesn't trust unmarried women.
And yet.
And yet.
And it has to be said here that we never see Mr. Kim.
We have not seen him yet.
We haven't seen him yet. We don't know if he exists. And a lot of times I get the impression that Mrs. Kim is herself a single mom. But we don't know that for sure yet. But yes, she's very critical of Lorelai.
I mean, the canon seems to be that she's not, as her name is Mrs. Kim, and Lane does refer to her parents plural. But functionally, yes, it feels like Mrs. Kim is essentially a single mom because we have not seen Mr. Kim, and it remains to be seen if we ever will. The other line that I want to point out, I don't remember exactly what Rory says to start this off, but Rory makes some sort of joke that Mrs. Kim doesn't get, and so Rory explains it's a joke, and Mrs. Kim's response is, "Boys don't like funny girls." Which is hilariously a very funny line.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of...
Mrs. Kim has a lot of funny lines.
She has great lines.
I mean, it's a comedy. Everybody gets funny lines. Witty, funny lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mrs. Kim she never smiles. She's very stern in her approach to everything. But she's funny. Yeah. She is funny.
And I believe, so the actress is named Emily Kuroda. And she just does such a great job in this role. She's has such.
And you just told me the other day that she's in that new movie, Kimmy.
Yes,
is the name of it.
Yeah, she has
it's kind of an Alexa type of product that, and the movie's all about that. It's what is his name?
Steven Soderbergh.
Soderbergh, yeah.
Yeah, and Steven Soderbergh.
She go ahead.
Steven Soderbergh just came out with a new movie called Kimmy. And yes, Mrs. Kim, the actress who plays Mrs. Kim, Emily Kuroda, plays the main character's therapist in that movie.
She doesn't have a lot of lines. You only see her on screen because the main character is, what's the word where they don't, agoraphobic. And so she doesn't really like to leave her home. So you see the therapist twice on screen. And it's Mrs. Kim, and I did not recognize her, but you did. Yeah. So, good job. She's older now. I mean, it's been, this episode in 2000 is now 21 years old. So.
Wow, yeah, for sure. It's been a while. But yeah, I recognized her right away. I'm not sure I can explain why. I just, as soon as I saw her, I was like, that's Mrs. Kim.
Well, I thought she did look familiar, but I could not place her. So that's good for you. Good memory.
All right, so that's the intervening scene, and then we have Sookie. I've watched too much True Blood. Sookie hitting that man in the face with the frying pan, with the cast iron skillet, and then we kind of get to the first big conflict of the episode, which is basically Lorelai discovering how much Chilton is actually going to cost, and. More specifically, the fact that she cannot pay it. We get a phone call. Lorelai calls someone at the school to basically ask if there's any way that she could just pay a part of it now and then the rest later. And you take from her side that they must have said no. And Lorelai does try to inject a little humor into the situation. She says, it's just that she's supposed to start Monday. It just doesn't give me a lot of time to pull a bank job. But
yeah, it's a great line.
Whoever it is on the other side of the phone does not seem to pick up on that. And Lorelai has to quickly explain that she was just making a joke and that she will find a way to pay for this school.
Yeah, because the woman on the phone doesn't have a sense of humor, and it is a phone thing, so she's not seeing Lorelai. Mm-hmm. But I love that line so much that I almost think we should call our podcast that. It just doesn't give me long to pull a bank check. And anyway, it's a great scene. She ends up hanging up, and here's another thing, a time lapse thing. She's not using a cell phone. This is Lorelai I'm talking about. She's using a wireless phone in her house. It's a landline, but it's a huge honking phone that is as big as her head. And I'm looking at this phone in the scene thinking, yep, I had one of those. So that's 21 years ago. We still had landlines. So anyway, that's just an off thing. But here's my question about that scene, what it raises for me in terms of the show itself. And that is the inconsistency about how they portray money and how it's used and how much everybody has. Lorelai has a house. It's a nice house.
A very nice house.
She has a Jeep that seems to be not very old. She has nice clothes. You know, they eat at Luke's a lot. They don't seem to be worried about money. They have a comfortable middle class life. Why did she? But she doesn't have enough money for the tuition. She must have known this. So why did she pursue the private school if she didn't have the money to pay for it? So when you went to private school, and this is why I'm bringing this up, it's because we are talking about how we relate to this show because you went to private school. We probably should have said that up front.
We should probably say that up front. Yeah. So
we should have talked about that.
You were a single mom.
I was a single mom. You were going to go to you needed to go to private school for a lot of reasons that we won't get into, that we might get into later. But you were academically gifted just as Rory is. And we looked at a couple different schools. You were miserable in public school. So when we found Thomas Jefferson, and we'll just give him a shout out here, it was the perfect school for you. So we looked at several different ones. And when you came out of Thomas Jefferson, the day that you went in to spend your half day with them, you had the biggest smile on your face that I've ever seen. And I knew right then, kind of with a sinking heart, because not only was it expensive, but it was a long-ass drive.
It was. Yeah.
It was a 40-minute drive. So one way.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was not, and they have the same situation here. She's going to have a long drive too. So we have a lot in common with them in terms of needing to go to a different school. We don't have the money for it. We had a fairly comfortable middle class existence, but we couldn't afford private school. So we did have to apply for scholarship money, and you did get scholarship money. And that's how we got you through Thomas Jefferson, even though I still had to pay a huge chunk of money and often had to work part-time jobs.
Yeah.
Lorelai never has to work a part-time job, but she has rich parents. And so my thing is, she went into this knowing she was not going to be able to afford this, and she was probably going to have to hit up her parents.
Yeah.
That's my point about that. And she acts throughout this there's at least 2 scenes where she says she's not going to do this. And yet she knows she's known all along she's going to have to do this, I think. If you were being honest with yourself. So
yeah, anyway. I do agree. I think they're a little inconsistent about money. I mean, it's a television show to a certain extent.
Yeah,
I've almost never seen a television show be very realistic about money. Period.
True.
But,
Friends.
Yeah, but it is
Friends is a great example.
Kind of, yeah, true. Yeah, those giant apartments in Manhattan that they can afford on a waitress and fry chef salary.
Although, in defense, just a quick defense of Friends here. Now that you have lived in Seattle for 10 years and supported yourself on a fairly small salary, I would say that that's the way you do it, is you do it with roommates. And that's how the people in Friends
True.
Mostly do it.
But in Friends, it's 2-person apartments. I lived in a 5-person apartment for most of that time.
True, and it wasn't Manhattan.
No, it wasn't Manhattan. So first of all, Seattle is cheaper, and secondly, it was a 5-bedroom apartment that was shared with 4 other people. And also, it was a constant part of my life during that period, making sure that we had someone in each of those rooms, whereas that's not really a big concern in Friends because it's only 2 people. Also, the size of that apartment was probably, like, the actual size of my apartment was probably equivalent to the size of the friend's apartment, including the bedrooms.
But it was 5 people. Yeah.
But yeah. But I do
Yeah.
think it's a little aggravating here, mainly because money is the big conflict. Money is essentially the inciting incident for the plot of the whole show.
Yeah, it is. And actually, we should, we'll get to that in a scene in just a few minutes. But yeah, it's the fundamental conflict between her and her parents, too.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And I mean, I don't know how specific we want to get, but while I was going to that private school, we did not live in a beautiful Victorian style house.
No. We lived in a large, but still, a rented condominium. It was a huge apartment, but it was still an apartment.
It was still an apartment, and I did and do have a younger brother. And for a period, we shared a bedroom, and then eventually he slept in the dining room because it was only a two-bedroom apartment.
It was a 2-bedroom apartment. As you got older and you needed space, he went into the dining room.
He went into the dining room. And, and we did eventually leave that condo, but all that is to say, if you came to our house, you could see that we weren't exactly living it up while I went to the private school.
No.
All right, so back into the episode. So it's actually Sookie is the first one who brings up the idea of calling the grandparents. She actually doesn't say it out loud because Lorelai won't let her, but
cuts her off.
Yeah, Lorelai brings up the fact that she can't pay for it, and Sookie's like, well, I hate to be the one to say it, but and Lorelai's like, no, don't even say it. But she very quickly changes her mind when she sees how excited Rory is to go to the school, and then we get this kind of beautiful shot of she's in her living room, Lorelai is, and she looks over at the mantle over the fireplace where there is a picture of a young girl who's definitely Lorelai in kind of a almost similar to what Rory. So Rory has just been trying on the skirt for the Chilton uniform, and then we cut to this picture of young Lorelai wearing that kind of skirt but a full uniform and standing in front of this giant beautiful old house and looking pretty miserable. She looks small compared to the house.
She's not smiling.
She's not smiling. And Lorelai contemplates this picture, and then it does kind of a fade, or I think it zooms in on the picture, and then it cuts to that house in real life, and the camera pans over to adult Lorelai sitting on the edge of her Jeep, clutching her coffee cup, and clearly steeling herself to go knock on the door. This is her parents' house.
It's a brilliant scene.
It's great.
Yeah, it's a brilliant scene. I mean, it's probably one of the best things I've ever seen on television, because it's just, and her face, she's got a look on her face. It's not unhappy. There's a lot going on in her face in that scene when it pans to her and she's sitting on this, like, what do they call it, an outboard or mortarboard or whatever, the thing that sticks out from the Jeep. It's a step basically to get up. She's sitting there in her suit, which is a very short skirted suit, with her legs in front of her. I mean, she just looks she looks like the young girl in the picture, but she also looks like the troubled young mom who has a child that she will do anything for, which I get. I completely, totally relate to Lorelai in that moment, but she has got to do the one thing in life she really does not want to do, and it's all for her daughter. It's a huge sacrifice. Yeah. It's a huge sacrifice, and it becomes instantly and immediately apparent when she goes to the door and her mother answers the door and seems disappointed to see her. Lorelai. Yeah. It's terrible. It's a terrible scene. And, how do you not embrace with loving enthusiasm the daughter you haven't seen in months? It's It's a really depressing and upsetting scene.
Yeah.
They don't dwell on it. They move on pretty quickly, and then you get the witticisms and whatever. But for a mother and a daughter, because I'm a daughter too, so it's a hard scene.
It's a hard
scene.
It's
a really hard scene.
Yeah. So yeah, Emily comes to the door, and we get a couple of jokes. Both Emily is Lorelai's mother, and Lorelai's father is named Richard. And they both separately make jokes about the fact that Lorelai has shown up on a day that's not a holiday. I think Emily says something like, "Is it Christmas already?" And I'm not sure. Richard might ask if it's Easter. I'm not totally sure, but they both make it clear that they only expect to see Lorelai on the holidays. And then Richard...
And Richard repeating it, too, makes it obvious it's a tired joke.
Yes.
Too. And it's an insulting joke.
Yeah. And then Richard very quickly jumps to the obvious conclusion: Lorelai needs money. Before she can even get the question out, he says, "You need money." I also want to point out that both Emily and Richard are extremely well dressed in the middle of the day, hanging out at home.
Oh, yeah.
Lorelai's wearing a little suit, but Richard is wearing a full-on suit with a bow tie and a pocket square. And Emily, I think, is wearing this, like, cream silk blouse with, like, pearls. She wears...
Sweater and pearls.
Sweater
She's very dressed up. Now, he's probably just gotten off work. So that one kind of makes a little bit of sense, just like it makes sense that Lorelai is still in her suit. But Emily is dressed like she has a luncheon to go to, and she's a society maven, but she doesn't leave the house to work. She does a lot of volunteer stuff, but she is clearly dressed for dinner.
Yeah.
And that also is a visual that sets up the difference between her and Lorelai, who will often eat dinner on the couch in her pajamas, which Emily would be just horrified by.
Yeah. I feel like it's also kind of interesting that Emily is wearing slacks, where Lorelai is wearing the short skirt. Emily's
short skirt.
Yeah. Emily's outfit is definitely very modest. Also, it's beautiful. When I saw it the first time on this rewatch, I was just like, I don't know how old it makes me, but I love what Emily's wearing. It's a
I know.
Gorgeous
it's
outfit.
Comfortable. It's elegant.
Yes,
and it's comfortable. Whereas, but elegant. And but what Lorelai is wearing is hip and young and professional. But still, it's a very short skirt.
Yeah,
and I would not be comfortable in that short of a skirt. Although she pulls it off. She's got a great body.
Yeah, she looks great.
Legs, and yeah, she looks great. But Emily does too.
Yeah,
but they're very different.
So yeah,
but the thing about this scene is that, and then we move into it, is that Emily is critical of Lorelai.
Yes,
and she makes some comments and they're witty, but they're critical. But she's never cruel. Richard is cruel to Lorelai in the scene, and it's heartbreaking how cruel he is to her. But so they discuss how much money the money that she needs, and Richard. What is the comment that he makes to her that's so cutting?
Well, the big cutting one happens later during the actual dinner. In this
we'll get to that later. Okay.
He does immediately assume that Lorelai needs money, and the way that he says it is condescending at the very least.
He's very condescending to her.
Yeah, he immediately jumps to her needing money, and just the way he says it is... It's like an assumption that she has failed in some way, and that's why she needs the money.
Whereas Emily quickly senses her opportunity.
Yes.
And this is what I love about Emily. She flips it around and says, "We will give you the money on two conditions. Mm-hmm. One is that you have to have dinner with us every Friday night, and you have to call me once a week with updates about my daughter." About my granddaughter. So what she's saying here is, if you want money from us, you have to come back into our life.
Yes.
I want you to be a part of my life again. I don't want to just see you at Christmas and Easter. I want to see you every week. That is not an unrealistic thing for a mother or a grandmother to want, especially a mother.
Yeah.
And it says to me immediately that she adores her daughter, even if she can't always show it, and she can't show it.
Yeah.
I mean, throughout the entire series, she has a hard time showing it. And she does continue to be critical of her, but she loves her and wants to be a part of her life. She feels rejected.
Yeah.
And this is her chance to get them back into her circle. Of course, she also takes a little bit further than that, which you will see in the second episode.
Yes.
But the main point is that she wants to be a part of their life because she loves them. This is a show about love.
And it does kind of, I mean, I find Emily to be one of the most compelling characters on the show, I think, because she's got this almost like a core contradiction. Like, on the one hand, she very much is this old money, everything needs to be proper kind of person. You know, she's the kind of person who's wearing a beautiful silk blouse while sitting at home alone all day. But on the other hand, she really loves her daughter, and a part of her understands that first part of her drove her daughter away. And she does not know exactly how to fix it, but she does know that she wants to fix it, and this is kind of her first step, is to demand kind of demand that Lorelai come back into her life so that they can talk again. And the funny thing about this scene is that the way Emily says it, you can see on her face, it's almost like the villain revealing their evil plan. You know, she's you
can just see it in her eyes how it's coming to her. Yeah,
she's like, I have figured out my clever scheme. But on the other hand, like, literally, she's just asking to be involved in her daughter and her granddaughter's life. What an evil person. Oh no, how dare she want this? So it's a...
Well, and it showcases the difference between Emily and Richard, too.
Yes.
Because Richard is still absorbed in his anger. He's still so upset with his daughter that he doesn't see this opportunity. But Emily does. And I do like Richard, but I love Emily. Yeah. And she's, of the two of them, she's the smarter one. Yeah. She is the better educated one. Yeah. She comes from old money. I think we've had a disagreement about this. I don't think he does. I think he's been very successful in his life, but she actually comes from old money. And we will eventually be introduced to his mother. So I do think he comes from old money, but we can talk about that later. We can talk about it later. Yeah. So but they're very different people, and he dwells in his righteous indignation about what his daughter did to him. Yes. And instead of who his daughter is, what she has made of herself, why she left their house. And Emily, on the other hand, quickly jumps to the more loving approach. And even though she does it in a way that it is kind of blackmail. Yeah. Because Lorelai's immediate response is, oh, here it comes. And before she can get the idea out, that's what Lorelai says. Here it comes. In a way, it's also the more pragmatic approach. Because, she realizes that they can give this money, and also that it gives them a little bit of leverage over Lorelai. Yeah. And that she can use that to essentially improve their relationship, or at least from her perspective, improve their relationship. Lorelai is definitely not happy about this. She does not want to do these dinners, but that's exactly why it's so clever, because Emily knows that this is kind of their only chance. If they want to have any relationship with Lorelai, they need to force it on her. And when you're watching this, you're thinking, what's wrong with you, Lorelai? This sounds like a great deal. Because we don't know yet. Because we haven't seen the dinner yet. Yep. We haven't seen the dinner yet. So we'll get to that. Let's get the other scene. Well, and is that the next scene? Well, there's one more very important scene before that. Another major conflict in the show. Yes. So go ahead. You set it up. Yeah. So the next scene is where we get the second major conflict of the episode, which is basically Rory meets a boy. She meets a boy. Rory is cleaning out her locker, and she runs into Dean, and she references Ruth something. I haven't actually seen the movie, but she makes a reference to Rosemary's Baby. There's a character named Ruth or something, and Dean causes her to drop her books, and then he stands there quietly while she's picking them up, and she calls him Ruth whatever, and he immediately understands that she's talking about Rosemary's Baby, and he says, oh, Rosemary's Baby, that's a great movie. And that causes her to kind of be pulled out of herself and
actually look at him because he got her reference, and she's like, whoa. And then she looks at him, and you can kind of see on her face that she immediately recognizes that he's cute.
It's Ruth Gordon, by the way. That's the actress, not the character.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever seen Rosemary's Baby. I would not have gotten the reference that she was talking about that movie. I did recognize Ruth Gordon's name, but when she, I forget, is it Joan Crawford? No. I forget what the full line was, but the line that she references, I wouldn't have gotten that, and I'm a lot older than Lorelai, so wouldn't have gotten it. So for Dean to get it is amazing.
Yeah,
shows that he's seen a lot of movies.
Yeah,
and Rory has too, so they have a lot in common. Sets that up.
Yeah, so she stands, he asks her if she's moving, and she says, no, just my books are, and he explains that he has just moved to this town from Chicago, and they proceed to walk around a little bit together. Oh, and she also suggests that he go to see Miss Patty, because he tells her that he needs to go find a job, and she says he should go see Miss Patty, who is the dance teacher, and he says, well, I don't really do much dancing, and she says, no, Miss Patty just knows everything. If someone needs some help, then Miss Patty will know, which is kind of how we first get introduced to Miss Patty, another great side character. She's the town dance teacher, and she's also the town gossip. She's the one who very much knows everybody's business all the time. And she spends most of her time literally standing in the doorway to her dance studio, shouting directions at the young ballerinas inside and smoking her cigarette.
She's standing in the doorway so she can smoke. I think she's the only person in the show who smokes. So and you know what? They didn't have a warning on it either. You know how now today TV shows say, oh, warning, sex, blah, 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 and smoking. It's now a warning. But in 2000, it wasn't a warning, as she does smoke. But she's hilarious, and she's just a real over-the-top character. And that's another element or component of this TV show that they do so well, is that there are so many characters in it that are just, on the surface, you think, oh, they're just cartoonish, they're tropes, whatever, but they're not. They're all fully fleshed out characters. They all have their own stories, and they're interesting and fun and funny.
Yes.
They put a lot of thought into the secondary characters, and she's one of them, and they're all just kind of quirky and fun, and you just wonder what their backstories are. You don't get that on everybody.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, that's kind of the point sometimes, that there's a lot of mystery with these characters. We don't really know their backstories, but it's hinted at that they all have interesting backstories.
Yeah.
And she's one of them.
Miss Patty, Rory does say that she used to be on Broadway, so that's our first
there you go.
hint about her backstory. So she and Dean do walk around the town together, and she's kind of giving him, or at least she's pointing out some things in the town, so not exactly giving him a full-on tour. And he tells her that he's actually been watching her for a little bit, or at least that he noticed her before. And specifically what he noticed is what he calls her concentration, that she has the best concentration of anyone he's ever seen. And she's like, what? And he explains that he saw her reading at the gazebo the other day when two boys were playing some kind of game, I don't know, sport game. They were throwing a ball back and forth, and one of them got hit in the head and started bleeding, and there was a whole kerfuffle.
Blood everywhere.
and Rory never looked up from her book, so he was impressed by her ability to concentrate, and Rory's response is a little dismayed, and she says, maybe I'm just unbelievably self-centered. And he says that
it's a good question. It's a good question, because I'm kind of dismayed by it too. I mean, when he describes it, I'm like, really? Because he said there was blood and there was screaming, and she's sitting that far away. She doesn't even look up.
That
is very absorbed. I'm not sure it's self-absorbed. I think he's absolutely right that she is able to concentrate, but I don't know. It does seem a little odd that she doesn't hear any of this going on.
Yeah, she's got some blinders on.
She does have some blinders on. But she's also very, like we were talking earlier, sheltered, a little reserved, a little introverted, except with the people that she knows really well. Mm-hmm. And she has never had a boy pay attention to her before. She has not dated.
At least she's never noticed a boy paying attention
Never
to her.
Noticed, because of her concentration. Yeah. She's got blinders on.
Even earlier in this scene, when they first interact, she doesn't even look at him until he gets her Rosemary's Baby reference. There's a whole... She's not even looking at his face until he says Rosemary's Baby, and then she pays attention to him and suddenly realizes that he's cute.
But I also think that's an assumption on her part that no boy would be interested in her. So she doesn't engage with him until he goes over and above and gets that reference. Yeah. Then she realizes that he might be worth... I think she's afraid of rejection. Yeah. So, because she is really smart, and she's into herself and into her own thing and has her blinders on. But when he gets the reference to the movie, she comes out of that for just enough time to realize that he's gorgeous.
I think there's also an element of this is like a coming of age moment for her.
Yes, it is very much a coming of age. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is kind of the first time that she's noticed a boy, and it does open up this whole section of the world for her. And in fact, it kind of immediately changes her mind about what she wants.
Because it's right on the cusp of a major change in her life that she has wanted to make 100%, and now all of a sudden here's a sticking point. Mm-hmm. Oh. And what I don't understand about this is you still live in the same town as this boy.
Yeah.
It's not boarding school.
But she is a teenager.
She is a teenager. She's not looking at it from the bigger context.
Yeah.
Which is, you want to set that next scene up?
So the next scene is Rory and Lorelai getting into a fight. They go to Luke's diner again, and all of a sudden Rory says that she no longer wants to go to Chilton. And first she's right off the bat, she's suddenly very ornery. She kind of implies that her mom is a bitch. She says something rude, and Lorelai tries to diffuse the tension by saying, "Hey, I called dibs on being a bitch tonight." And Rory's response is, "Just tonight?" Which I sucked in my breath a little bit at that moment. I was like, "Ooh, you just said that to your mom. Wow." But
it's pretty amazing. They have a really open relationship.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you and I would have ever spoken to each other with that specific kind of, maybe in a fight. But not the B word. Yeah, I don't. The B word.
I don't think we would have done that. And to be fair, she doesn't actually say it. She just implies it. Yeah. But and Lorelai is totally thrown by this. She's like the day that Lorelai has had is the day of flagellating herself before her parents to ask them for money in order for Rory to go to this school, and now all of a sudden Rory is being kind of tetchy and ornery and suddenly says that she does not want to go to Chilton anymore.
And she says this after Lorelai has had this exhausting meeting with her parents. Mm-hmm. So it's the last thing she expects to hear. It's the last thing she wants to hear. Mm-hmm. And the audience knows, but Rory doesn't know. So we're sitting there thinking, oh my God, how unfair is this?
Yeah.
It's so unfair to Lorelai.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, Lorelai reacts in such a way that she pulls the parenting card. We'll get to that in a minute.
She does.
But that's something that she doesn't do very often.
And it is unfair to Lorelai, but also Rory doesn't know that. The last thing that Lorelai said to her parents was that she does not want Rory to know that she's borrowing the money from them, which will come up again. So Rory doesn't realize what her mother is sacrificing. She thinks that it's just her own sacrifice, and she's decided she no longer wants to make it. And then, Lorelai does pull the parenting card and says, "You're going to this school anyway." And then they both angrily get up and leave the diner, which is when Miss Patty outs Rory pretty much immediately. They walk past Miss Patty, smoking her cigarette and shouting at her children, and she immediately says to Rory that she found that nice young man a job over at Taylor's Market, and she compliments Rory on her good taste because he sure is a cutie. And
Lorelai suddenly gets it.
Yes.
And she said, it's a boy. Of course it's a boy. Dark hair, romantic eyes, looks a little dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
She gets it. She knows exactly what's going on. It is just awake, just a sudden awareness, sudden awakening.
Yes.
That her daughter has met a boy for the first time.
Yeah.
And she's kind of kept her from that. I mean, Rory not having a boyfriend or not being obsessed with boys, as most 16-year-old girls are, and Lorelai has been probably a great relief to Lorelai as a mom. That she wasn't, that Rory is not Lorelai. And she hasn't had that.
Yeah, and I think it's
happen.
A specific fear for Lorelai. Lorelai is very much
afraid
that Rory might turn out to be just like her and might throw away her opportunities in exactly the same way. And in fact, that's what she says. She says, of course it's a boy because you're me.
And yet she's not. She's not Lorelai. It's
True.
Interesting, though, and I relate to this, too, because my mom had the same fear. She was very strict, she was very rigid, because, and we didn't find this out until many, many years later, she had me out of wedlock between marriages at a very young age. None of us knew this. So I could understand for years and years why she was so hard on me, why she was so determined that I wasn't gonna, couldn't date till a certain age, had to be in by a certain time. I was gonna, she did not want me to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And that is what Lorelai is going through here. It has been such a relief to her that Rory has not been the kind of girl who could get pregnant at 16. Yeah. That has been a great relief to Lorelai. And here we have just the horror that she has been avoiding for years hitting her in the face.
So they continue their fight all the way home, and I think it's actually when they're home that Lorelai says something like, I understand liking boys, you don't get pregnant at 16 without being into boys. And then they kind of go to their separate corners. Rory goes to her room, Lorelai returns to the bedroom, and they both turn on Macy Gray. After the fight, I think Rory turns it on first. We have Rory turning it on in her room, and then we cut to Lorelai in the living room. She turns on the exact same song. And in fact, this is kind of a callback to the first scene, because in the first scene in the diner, one of the things that Rory was complaining about was that she couldn't find her Macy Gray CD, and it turned out that was because Lorelai had it.
In the big bag with all the lip gloss.
Yes.
She pulls it out.
So even in the middle of this fight, they're kind of reacting to it exactly the same way. Mm-hmm. And then the next scene is back at the inn. We cut into, we open in on some burly men taking the oven, the stove out of the kitchen because Sookie has apparently destroyed it. They refer to it as a Viking. I don't know if that's a real
I think it's a very expensive. It's a restaurant.
Okay, it's a restaurant level
and those
stove.
are going to be expensive. Yeah.
And Michel has some line to Sookie, something about like, "Who would have thought you're the one who's left standing?" like it was a war between Sookie and the stove.
And the stove. Yep.
But yeah, so Sookie has destroyed the stove, and then I think you wanted to mention Lorelai is telling Sookie about the fight that she and Rory had.
Yeah, and she says to her, "We don't fight. We never fight." And the thing is, that's pretty true. They rarely fight, and this is, we see this fight, we kind of think they're setting them up to have fights all the time, but they really don't.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think you and I did fight. And I do think, it wasn't all the time, but we did. Teenagers and their parents fight, and that's a really important part of growing up is, you disagree or you fight or whatever, and how that's a separating that happens in the teen years that has to happen. Parents put down rules, kids push back,
mm-hmm.
And there are fights. That has to happen. So for her to say, we don't fight, we never fight, is an odd thing to throw in here. And it kind of suggests that there's no separation between them, but it also might they both have to grow up during the course of the TV show, the 7 years that it's on. And because Lorelai is an adult and for all intents and purposes has been very successful in having a child, building a career, raising that child, making a life. She's been very successful, but in some emotional ways has not grown up and in fact has a hard time having relationships with men throughout the series. And then her daughter is going through the same thing. So the fighting is probably something they need to do on occasion so that they both can grow up and move on to, their post-living together life, which has to happen. Children grow up and move out. They have to do that. So I think that's a very interesting line that they throw in there.
So the fight is still not resolved, but they do have to do the first dinner with Emily and Richard, because, Lorelai did put her foot down and is insisting that Rory still go to Chilton, even if she doesn't want to. And the condition of that is dinner with the grandparents, Emily and Richard. So they go to Emily and Richard's house, and Emily lets them in, and Lorelai has another cup of coffee in her hand, which Emily offers to throw away for her, and Lorelai says, "Oh, I can do it," and tries to throw it in what appears to be a trash can just inside the door, but Emily says, "No, you need to take it to the one in the kitchen, because I guess this is a decorative trash can." Lorelai pretends to agree, but then just waits for Emily to walk away and throws it in the empty decorative trash can anyway.
And that's another visual gag, and they have a lot of recurring visual gags in the show, like what is her name with the dance teacher?
Miss Patty.
Miss Patty is a visual gag.
Yes.
And Lorelai having a constant cup of coffee in her hands is a visual gag. And then just the difference in how she and her mother, this is a constant setup of the difference, how they approach life. Yeah. Emily's very, very formal.
Yes. And
Lorelai is the exact polar opposite. She is the opposite of formal. She is as casual as they come.
Yeah. So they go into the sitting room, and we get a repeat of the same joke from before. Emily says, "Champagne, anyone? It's not every day I have my girls here on a day the banks are open."
That's funny, but then they also give Rory a glass of champagne and she's 16. Does anybody but me notice that? Because I was like, really? She's 16.
I mean, it is only a flute, so it's not a lot of alcohol. And I kind of feel like this is sort of a normal rich person thing.
I think it is. I think that's the point.
Yeah, to just, rich people are day drinkers.
Champagne day drinkers.
Yes. So then,
and the other thing about that scene when they get there is that Emily does not hug either one of them.
No.
So they get to the door, they walk in, there are no hugs for the daughter and the granddaughter from Emily. And the other thing we should point out here is that they are all three of them the Gilmore Girls. So when we talk about the Gilmore Girls, we're not just talking about Rory and Lorelai. We're also talking about Emily. She is the third Gilmore Girl.
Yeah.
And I was instantly amazed that there was no hug.
Yeah.
She hasn't seen them in months. Well, she's seen Lorelai just the other day, but she hasn't seen Rory in months, so she didn't hug her.
Yeah.
So there's just a very formality.
I don't think she hugged Lorelai in the earlier scene either.
No, she didn't. In fact, she was kind of disgusted to see her. So
yeah,
not disgusted. That's not the right word. She was just it wasn't warm.
Confused for sure, and not excited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then we get the dinner, and this is where we kind of start to see why Lorelai didn't want to do this. And interestingly, it's not Emily, it's Richard who kind of immediately comes off as a jerk. I mean, they're both there's definitely some awkwardness right off the bat. Emily tries to make a toast to Rory's education, saying that education is the second most important thing after family. And Lorelai says, "Pie," as a joke, and it falls totally flat. Emily and Richard just stare at her in response. And then they move into the formal dining room, where their kitchen help person, I'm not sure if she's a chef, but they have this hired help person who has prepared this lavish meal of, I think it's lamb and potatoes. And, Emily's asking how the lamb is, and Rory says it's fine. Lorelai tries to mention something that happened at the inn recently, or says that, things at the inn are going really well. And Richard immediately takes the opportunity to be a real jerk. He says, speaking of which, Christopher is doing really well. His internet startup is going to go public next week. And Lorelai's like, speaking of which, how is that a speaking of which? And this is where we learn that Christopher is the name of Rory's father. Christopher is the boy that got Lorelai pregnant at 16. They chose not to get married, and apparently Richard and Emily are still not okay with their decision not to get married. It does, in fact, seem, they're obviously not pleased with the fact that she got pregnant, but it seems like a big part of their contention here is the fact that Lorelai and Christopher chose not to get married.
That Lorelai chose not to marry Christopher. I think yes. Christopher would have married her. And this actually comes out, the scene kind of moves into the kitchen. I can't remember why Lorelai goes in there, but she gets very, very frustrated by the conversation at the dinner table.
She goes in there because Richard straight up insults her.
Yeah, he insults her. So she goes into the kitchen. Emily follows her, and they have a fight. And it gets loud. And the whole story, that is the scene where the whole story comes out.
Yes.
Lorelai got pregnant. She did not want to marry Christopher. She did not want to ruin his life. And she says that. And this man that you think is successful, he wouldn't be that successful man with a startup if we had gotten married at 16. Or maybe this happened at the dinner table. I don't remember. But one of them.
It happens in the kitchen.
It might have been Rich. It happens in the kitchen. Emily says, But your father would have found a place for him at the
insurance company.
The insurance company, the bank, or whatever. And Lorelai says that's what you wanted for him. That wasn't what he wanted for himself.
Yeah.
And so this fight happens, and it comes out that she says, is it Lorelai that says we will be here every Friday night because you were paying for paying the tuition or whatever. And anyway, it comes out.
She says something like, "Is this what it's going to be like?"
That's what. Yeah.
I'll come here and you guys will insult me in exchange for you paying for the school,
the tuition.
And
they are speaking so loudly that Rory can hear it in the dining room, and it's the reveal.
So the comment that sets that off is Richard says something like, Christopher is so smart, Rory, that must be where you get it.
That's what he said. Yeah. Oh, can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine a father saying that about his daughter?
Yeah, it's so
rude. It's cruel.
Yeah.
That's why I said earlier that he is cruel, whereas, Emily's critical, but she's not cruel. She's loving. He does not come across, it's almost like he hates his daughter at this point. He does not come across as a loving father. I'm not sure that we ever see him completely set that aside. Throughout the entire series, he's always this curmudgeon who wants it his way. And that's the way both of them are. Richard and Emily both. They're mad at their daughter because she did not do what they wanted her to do.
Yes.
They can't be proud of her success because it wasn't the success they wanted her to have.
Yeah.
And what they wanted for her was a traditional upper class, marry one of the other Brahmins, have babies, go to clubs and play, what is it, that game that they play?
Bridge?
Be part of the social scene. What is it?
Bridge? I don't know.
Yeah, play bridge. That's exactly what it is. Play bridge. Clearly, I'm not an upper class woman. Play bridge. Be a volunteer. Be a donor.
Lunches.
Support causes. Yeah, that's what Emily has, and that's what they wanted Lorelai to have, and she didn't want that.
Yeah,
she was a Spitfire. She was not the perfect daughter for them, but instead of appreciating who she was, they pushed her away, and then she did the ultimate bad thing by getting pregnant. Well, semi-ultimate, pentultimate, because the ultimate was not marrying Christopher.
Yeah,
and having the life that they wanted for her.
Yeah. The suggestion of this scene is definitely that the real sin was that she did not get married when she got pregnant. What Emily says is, when you get pregnant, you get married. That's just what you do. And she didn't want that. And the fact that she went off and has really made something of her life. She, Emily says something about, like, you went off and became a maid, and Lorelai says, yes, I became a maid, and then I worked my way up, and now I run that place. And it does not matter to them, because she's still not married. And specifically, she's still not married to the father of her child. And also specifically, she's still not married to a wealthy man from an old money family.
In their circle.
Yes.
In their social circle, yeah.
Part of why they wanted her to marry Christopher specifically is because he is from the same kind of family that they are.
He's in their social circle. And, when she talks about how she worked her way up, that's another way that what we have in common with them is I did too. I was the first in my family, what is that called? To go to college.
First college graduate.
First generation college graduate.
Yeah.
And it took me 7 years to get through college. So when she talks about how hard it was that she worked her way up to get into this managed position, and she's taking classes.
Yeah.
She's getting her bachelor's degree. It's taken her a long time because she's got a child to raise and she's got a full-time job and friends. And she's got a whole she's got her own social community in her town that isn't the one that her parents wanted for her. But she has worked really hard and continues to work really hard. And I really relate to that. So I think that's another way, one of the reasons that, we both related to the Gilmore Girls is that even though Lorelai is much younger than I was when we were watching it, and, because I didn't have you at 16. That's another difference. I did not have you at 16, and I did have you when I was married at 30. So that's a huge difference too. But otherwise, this is another thing we have in common is that being a single parent, having to work really hard, sometimes working 2 jobs, and so she has really, really done an amazing job with her life, and they don't appreciate any of that.
Yeah,
especially Richard. Emily might, but it's still not what she wanted for her, so it's going to take her a long time to get to a point where she accepts it.
Yeah.
But the 2 things about the dinner, two more things, is one is that Richard says she's tall.
Yes.
And I did notice when he said that all the Gilmore Girls are tall.
Yeah.
And which was funny because you and I are not. There's another difference. We're both really short.
Very short.
So when somebody points out that somebody's tall, I notice that comment because it's an interesting comment for him to make. But the other thing is when they're sitting in the living room and Lorelai and Emily are bickering on the couch, Richard takes part of the newspaper and kind of very quietly hands it over to Emily.
To Rory.
It's such a significant... to Rory, sorry, thank you. It's such a significant visual thing that it ends up in the opening credits of the show.
Yes. Yeah.
So he respects her. And the thing is, how does he respect her and not her mother?
Yeah.
So I think that there's an implication there that he does respect his daughter, Lorelai, but he just can't get past his own childlike anger.
Yeah. And I think that is the beginning of something. I think we're going to see Rory and Richard's relationship evolve over time. But that moment is a small moment, but it is significant. It's kind of almost like an olive branch, like a visual olive branch over to Rory. Not to Lorelai, but to Rory.
To Rory.
Yeah.
And the final... My final take on this last scene is, other than the fact that it's just a really, really important scene for the entire series, is that it once again reunifies Lorelai and Rory, and they realize that they have to stay unified against the grandparents.
Yes.
And so when they come away from that, the fight is gone. Rory knows the truth. Lorelai's been outed.
Yeah.
So in the final scene, Lorelai says, "So tell me about the guy."
Yeah. So when Rory overhears about the money, she pretty much immediately changes her mind because she realizes what her mother is sacrificing, that her mother has subjected herself to this awful night on an ongoing basis so that Rory can go to this school, and it kind of puts everything into perspective, puts her back on the right track, and she changes her mind and decides she does want to go to Chilton after all. And so they go to Luke's again. They end at Luke's even after that incredibly, like, uncomfortable but lavish meal at their parents'. They go to Luke's, and they both order coffee, and Rory also orders chili fries. And
oh, yeah. That look delicious.
Yeah. And Luke reluctantly brings them over, but at the last minute, he says, "I can't help it. This is so unhealthy. Rory, put down that cup of coffee. You do not want to grow up to be like your mom." And she looks at her mom and says, "Sorry, too late."
Yeah, it's sweet. It's a very sweet scene.
It is a very sweet scene.
Oh, man. There's a lot of bonding in that scene. There's a lot of bonding throughout the whole show.
Yeah.
So when Lorelai says to her, so talking about the guy, Rory's response is, "You really understand boundaries." That's an important comment. It's not just funny. Coming from a 16-year-old, that's pretty amazing. But Lorelai does not understand any boundaries ever. There are no boundaries.
Especially when it comes to Rory.
Especially when it comes to, but to everything. It's what makes her a good businesswoman.
Yeah.
It's what makes her a good mother. Mm-hmm. And it's what makes her a really good friend to all the people that she's friends with in this town. And a good family member, because this town, for her, has supported her emotionally, and that's her real family. She's got a biological family that she does not relate to very well. And that this first episode is setting up that she's going to have to throw herself back into her bio family.
Yeah.
But her real family is her chosen one. It's this town. And her not understanding boundaries is how she is so good with people.
Yeah.
People in the town.
Yeah. Also, it's a town of people who don't understand
boundaries. It's true. So none of them do. None of them. That's why the gossip thing is such a big thing. Before we finish, are we finished with the scene-by-scene thing?
I guess, boy, I'm not sure how important this is, but we do get a little bit of insight into Luke in this scene, mainly because when he shows up to take their order, he's wearing a collared shirt, and Lorelai notices this and tells him that he looks nice, and he explains that he had to go to the bank today, and they like collars there. So just sort of a quick little moment to kind of underline that Luke does not normally dress this way. He normally dresses the way we saw him earlier, with a backwards hat and maybe a t-shirt, maybe a plaid shirt, but in a very kind of like coded working class sort of outfit. Comfy clothes that you can wear to do potentially dirty work in. You know, he's in a diner.
He's a type.
Yeah, he's a type. For sure.
He wears the hat backwards.
Yeah.
You know, he's always got like a plaid. It's like, I can't even. It's a type.
Although he is a little bit of a subversion of the type, because he's so into healthy food, and usually this type is not really. It's a kind of a masculine type. And usually that masculine type, goes along with someone who wants to eat a lot of like red meat and that kind of food, which he does serve, but he himself eats healthy. And specifically, one of his lines in this episode is, "Red meat can kill you."
Yes. After he's just served them. So, is it chili on the fries? Yeah. Or no, burgers. They were eating burgers.
The burgers, yeah. I don't think he's an outright vegetarian, but he's definitely more in the Mrs. Kim camp of eating healthy food. He eats salads. He eats vegetables. So for the most part, he's this kind of masculine, curmudgeon, like working class guy. But the little like twist there is, despite all of that type, and despite the fact that he owns a diner, he himself prefers to eat healthy.
Well, and in this last scene too, he's not just got a collared shirt on; he's not wearing the hat. Yeah, and you can see that he's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hinted at earlier, but he is really attractive, and Lorelai gets that for a couple seconds. She sees him as attractive for a few seconds, and that comes up again later on when is it the second episode?
Yeah, I think we'll get into that a bit in the second episode.
We'll get into that later. Okay. And try not to. Here's. We should say this. We are trying not to get ahead of ourselves.
Yes,
it's hard to do because we've seen the whole show. Yeah, and it's very easy to say, "Oh, this happens. Oh, wait, no, that doesn't happen to the 5th season." Yeah.
So
we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
We cannot guarantee absolutely no spoilers in this podcast. We may slip up, but if we slip up too bad, I will cut it from the episode. For the most part, we are going to try to not spoil big things. We may accidentally occasionally reference a character who hasn't shown up yet, but we're definitely going to try not to spoil any major big events. And for the most part, we're going to try to avoid spoilers as much as we can. We may occasionally, like I said, reference someone who hasn't shown up yet or say like a small
accidentally
thing. Yes, accidentally. But we're going to try our very best to keep things spoiler free here for anyone who hasn't seen the show before and maybe wants to watch along. But so that was my note about Luke. We end with a shot of Lorelai and Rory eating in the diner. The camera kind of shows them from the outside and pulls away. I think it might actually be the ending shot from the opening credits. So I think that wraps us up for the episode. Do you have any final thoughts?
Just a few things on the characters. You know, I do agree with you that Luke is an interesting, a mixed bag of stuff because he is this guy who runs a diner and yet he eats pretty healthy. I think the show is about love. I think it's okay to say that now, because even though we're trying not to foreshadow or give any spoilers. Kim loves Lane. She wants the best for her. Emily loves Lorelai and Rory. That's why she wants them back in her life. Lorelai loves Rory, and Sookie mothers them both.
Yeah.
So it's about love, how it defines us, how it limits us, how it uplifts us, how it connects us, and the love of the town. I think is important there. Music is in popular culture also very important themes in the show. They bring, they're not just things that happen as cultural references. I think they're really important. Music is a very important thing in the show consistently. The whole Macy Gray thing. And Lane wants to be a musician.
Yeah.
She loves rock music. She loves punk rock specifically.
Yeah.
She has a passion for music. And the Carole King song is very important, which we're not going to be able to play probably in our podcast because it is very expensive to play a licensed.
But it's the opening theme song.
The opening theme song is Where You Lead. Is the name of it. And that is what our podcast is called, Where You Lead. So, but music is an important part of it, cultural references. And, I wonder if that relates to the fact that Lorelai and Rory are so close in age. That could be why they're only 16 years apart. That's really not that big a gap. Yeah. So they're growing up together, and that may be part of the cultural references that they've grown up together, they're continuing to grow up together, and we will see later on that Lorelai has to let go. Yeah. And so part of what's going on here is they've had this really tight-knit, close relationship, and as the show progresses, Lorelai has to let Rory go. She has to let her grow up.
Yeah.
At the same time as she's kind of building some kind of relationship with her parents, because she's got to get through these Friday night dinners with her sanity intact.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
true.
Yeah.
I guess my final note is mainly just since, we talked about Sookie a number of times, and neither of us mentioned that Sookie is played by Melissa McCarthy.
Oh my God, we didn't say that. Yeah.
Yeah, this was kind
of the biggest star in this show.
Yeah, after this show, Melissa McCarthy was kind of the one who went on to have the biggest career, and this was kind of her start.
Stepping back, Edward Herrmann was a big star before this show was made. He is a huge star. So the two names from this show that just about anybody of any generation probably would recognize are Edward Herrmann, for my generation and older, I think, and then Melissa McCarthy. Everybody who's alive today, if you don't know who she is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this was her start.
Multiple of these actors have gone on to do more things. I would just say that I think Melissa McCarthy is probably at this point the most famous of the former cast members on the show. And
Absolutely.
She's wonderful. I love Melissa McCarthy. She's great in this show. She really brings Sookie to life, and Sookie is one of my favorite parts of the show for sure.
And I think it says something about her as an actress that we completely forgot to mention it. Because she gets so into the character.
Yeah.
We're watching this and we're not seeing Melissa McCarthy. We're seeing Sookie. And is she really the one that was in Bridesmaids? Is that the name of the movie that she was in?
Yeah, she was in Bridesmaids.
She's a crazy character in that movie. And it's like, Wow, that's the same actress.
And it's a very different character. The character that she plays in that movie is like, it is slapsticky, but in a completely different way. It's like this kind of,
she's intense.
Like, yeah, this kind of almost masculine, like butch persona. And this kind of, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's just like her character in Bridesmaids is just like less traditionally feminine. Sookie, while a little crazy, has a very feminine presentation. She's got her hair in braids. She's very pretty, and she's, you know, just as into the girly things that Lorelai and Rory are into. So it's a very different character.
But I'm glad you brought it up because it's very important.
Yeah, I just thought, well,
very important.
While we're mentioning people, we should probably mention.
We should probably mention this.
That's
Melissa she's a big McCarthy. Star.
All right, yeah, I think that's pretty much, I think that covers all of my notes. Anything else on your end?
Nope, I'm good. We'll see you at the next episode.
All right, cool. So yeah, I'm Tess Adair. You can find me at my website, tessadair.com. That's TESSADAIR.com. Or you can follow me on Instagram at author.tess.adair.
Okay. I'm Beth Von Baron. You can find me on Instagram as well at STL_writer_Beth. And the STL is for St. Louis because we didn't mention this, but I live in St. Louis and Sarah lives in Seattle. I'm also on Facebook at Beth Von Baron Writer, and that's V as in Victor, O-N, B as in boy, EHREN Writer. I'm not sure we'll have to do this in subsequent episodes to spell our names out. Maybe people will remember it. I don't know. But this has been Where You Lead, a mother-daughter podcast about the Gilmore Girls. We'll see you next time.
Yep, we'll see you in 2 weeks.